Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Inspired Business Media Virtual Roundtable on the conversational customer journey with Live Person. To my mind, the last 6 months have seen pretty substantial disruption in every market, with a lot of people working from home, the increasing use of digital, and a huge amount of uncertainty, which is certainly affecting me and I'm sure is affecting others. So we're here today to discuss what all of this means for customers, and the journeys that they take with our brands. To introduce myself briefly, I'm Leo Franks. I'm a marketeer in the professional services industry. I've led international teams now in director roles for the last 20 years across Deloitte, Ernst & Young, FTI Consulting, and most recently as Chief Marketing Officer at the legal services firm Augusta. But I'm delighted today to be joined by a great panel from a variety of industries to discuss how customer journeys have evolved through this very difficult period. In terms of agenda for the session today, in a moment I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves. We'll then do a very quick short poll of the audience. I'm very interested to hear your views about several key topics. We'll then move to a roundtable discussion, asking the panelists some pre-agreed topics. And finally, we'll ask you, the audience, for any questions that you have. So at any point during the session, if you have a question, you should see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Just hit that, please. Type in questions and we'll take them at the end of the session. Is that this session will run for 1 hour, but if we have a huge number of questions, we might go slightly beyond that. So that is the agenda. And as I said, we've got a great panel. I'll now turn to the panel to ask them to introduce themselves. Let me start off with Samantha Rosendorf, who's a Senior Manager in Global Enterprise Solutions at our host Live Person. Sam, would you like to say hi?
Great, thank you, Leo. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here today. As Leo says, I lead our solutions here at Live Person, which means that I work very closely with our existing product and our people and our prospects and our existing enterprise customers to bring to life their conversational and automation strategy and pair that with our product. So a lot to share today, lots of war stories. I wonder, Leo, is it just worth giving a quick 1 minute, 2 minute introduction to Live Person and who we are?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Great. So if you haven't heard of us before, we are the company who invented business chat 25 something years ago. And about 5 years ago, we completely changed and re-platformed what we do. We recognized that there was a gap in the market where chat really wasn't cutting it anymore because we are all working more asynchronously. So we're all messaging each other. I certainly have WhatsApp going nuts on my phone. I have a Messenger. I'm sure for many of you it was the same, specifically with lockdown, everyone turned to those asynchronous channels. And that's a great way to work because you can stop and start. You don't have to continuously be there to hold on that conversation. And so we launched what we call asynchronous messaging, and we started in app, and then we got a tap on the shoulder from Apple to help them be their official launch partner for Apple Business Chat. And following on from that, we went on to WhatsApp and some of the other channels. So now we're servicing 400 plus of the largest enterprises, 18,000 small companies, and really bringing messaging to life for them. And for us, that means bringing together your best of your customer experience in those channels that we all like to use today, and also pairing that with automation and AI. You can't have a conversational strategy without an automation strategy. And so we're excited to bring that all together and make that a reality. So in a nutshell, Live Person, and that's me.
Thank you very much. Really good to hear. And I suppose we have you to thank or you to blame for all the chats that go on in sessions like this. Let's move on to other panelists. Can I ask Gavin Killen, Head of Digital Services at Boardgase Centrica, please? Gavin, could you just say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, Gavin Killen, Head of Digital Services for Boardgase, part of Centrica. We own Boardgase, we own British Gas and another couple of entities, and I'm responsible for our websites and apps, etc., and the way we use them and communicate to from our customers.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Nice to have you with us. Now let's come to Will Kingston, Head of Customer Experience at the merchant bank Close Brothers. Hi, Will.
Thanks, Leo. Hi, everyone. Prior to joining Close Brothers, I was the Head of Customer Operations at a London-based fintech. And before that, I worked in management consulting across Australia and Southeast Asia in customer strategy. Close Brothers is a 150-year-old merchant bank, which is a great thing in terms of the trust in the brand in the market, but it also means that there's sometimes some challenges when you're trying to drive a digital agenda in quite a conservative environment. So I'm, in particular, as we're currently undergoing a big digital transformation, it's a great conversation for me to have, because it goes to the technological, but more so the cultural challenges that come with adopting messaging and driving that customer first mindset. So a very great conversation for me to be involved in. So.
Thanks, Will. Good to have you with us. And now to, last but not least, Kit Wilson, Head of Transformation at Welsh Water. I was going to try and say Welsh Water in Welsh, but perhaps I'll leave that to you, Kit, so I don't embarrass myself.
Thank you very much. Do a Cymru for reference. So really nice to be here. Thanks everyone for having me. So I'm Head of Transformation for Welsh Water. I'm responsible for the change that we deliver in our business. And one of the big programs of work that I've been leading over the last 18 months is our digital transformation program. So that's looking at how we provide a completely transformed and far more accessible and user-friendly digital experience to our customers, utilizing things like user-centered design to make sure that the experience they get is one that they would expect, want, and ultimately use. And also looking at how we streamline, automate, and transform the services for our colleagues internally, so we can, reduce the cost of our bills for our customers. So that's me in a nutshell. Just for kind of context, Welsh Water obviously covers water supply to all of Wales. Just over 2 million people is our kind of customer base.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction. In a moment, we'll move to our pre-prepared questions, but if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to ask the audience for a little bit of input. So could we please have our poll up on screen? So the first question is about you and your involvement in managing customer journeys. So the question is, do you manage the customer journey for your organization or not? And you can vote yes, or you can vote no. Please click on the option now. If you're watching on recording, apologies, you won't be able to see these questions, but we'll talk through the answer later. Okay, that's probably enough time with that question. Could we move on to the second question on the poll, please? So the second question is about AI, which Samantha touched on. It's about whether you are currently using AI messaging within your organization. And there are 3 options this time: yes, no, or launching soon. So please do click one of those answers. And again, if you're watching on recording, I'll talk through the answers in a moment. I'll give you a couple more seconds. And okay, thank you. Could we move to the final question on the poll now, please? Final question, and this is about customers. Have you seen an increase in customers adopting digital channels during the pandemic? 2 options, yes or no. Please take a second to answer, and in a moment we'll look at the results of those 3 questions before we go into our panel discussion. Okay, thank you very much. Please could we see the results of those 3 poll questions? Okay, so the first one, do you manage the customer journey? Relatively even split, 57% saying yes, they do manage the audience, the journey, and 43% saying no. So a little bit more saying yes, they have ownership than do not. Okay, let's go to our second one, please. So our second question about using AI messaging, overwhelming majority, 60% saying yes, further 10% saying launching soon. So 7 out of 10 are either up or will be soon, and only 30% do not. So that's good, because clearly we're talking about the topic today, and if you'd all said no, I'd be wondering why you were here. So you're clearly on the right webinar. Thank you, and let's have the final question. Have you seen an increase in customers adopting digital channels? Overwhelming 89% saying yes, and only minority of 11% saying no. And that certainly chimes with my experience. So obviously digital, AI, and a focus on customer journey are all important at these very difficult times. Okay, thank you all to the audience for your participation. We'll now move into our pre-prepared questions. And just a reminder, if you have another question for the panel at any point, just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and write down that question, and we'll take it at the end of the session. So the 5 questions we're covering today are roughly around the following topics. Firstly, changes in consumer preferences. Secondly, In light of those changes, what are we doing about implementing transformation? Thirdly, so we've done that transformation, what are we doing in marketing terms to bring it to life? Fourthly, the customer journey. How are we optimizing the customer journey in light of all those changes? And finally, the fifth question will be about metrics. How are we measuring all of this change that's come about as a result of the last few months? So they are the topics, and let's move into the first question now. So to the panel, please. Shifting consumer preferences. Has there been a tangible shift in consumer preferences towards digital channels? A tangible shift in consumer preferences towards digital channels. Samantha, why don't we come to you first, please, for your view on that?
Yeah, sure. Happy to share that. I think it's telling that 60% of our audience already are on the journey towards messaging, and some more of you are on that journey. Digital communication really is our new normal. I don't speak to any new prospects who don't have a target about a percentage of their business that they would like to become digital. And I think we're seeing that, as you say, beyond the pandemic, there was a push to do that quicker. And I'd love to hear from some of our panelists about how that has helped to move things along, if it has indeed. But certainly what we've seen is that the change isn't just for our customers, that change is also there for our agents. We had to change the way that businesses were working. You no longer could be office-based. We're all working from home at the moment, and we had to make that switch as brands very, very quickly. And so we went from 100% off-site or on-site to 100% at home. And we had some brands who did that in as little as 2 days. And that really came from the right kind of buying in the business and wanting to make that change. But that's only possible because, one, we enabled the businesses to be able to do that, but also because our customers are happy to be serviced in a way that they can get a result. I think to me, it was quite clear as part of lockdown that what was important to our customers was managing expectations and that they could get in touch with you. So I'm sure you experienced the same. I tried to call British Airways and just a whole bunch of other services, and that was a real challenge because everyone had an increase in contacts, and it was an increase in contracts and a decrease in the team who could help out with that. And so I think it's really important that we have a way of communicating with those consumers and managing their expectations. And whether that's reactively, so having an invite in the IVR to say, instead of waiting on hold for 2 hours or longer, why not press 1 now and message us instead? Or even getting ahead of those queries. I think we all knew we were going to get the same type of queries of certain types, certainly coming up over and over again. And so what can you do to get ahead of that? How can you use proactive messaging? So from our perspective, certainly from a live person view, we've seen that, one, customers were ready in those channels, they were ready to take them up, but there was even more of an appetite of that when it became so necessary to speak to our brands in such a challenging time.
Thank you, Samantha. Really good points around speed, but also, customer permission. Gavin, can we come to you, please, and ask for your thoughts on the shift towards digital?
Yeah, I'll echo exactly what you said, Samantha. Like we were going out to do a dry run test of our new IT Office 365 infrastructure the day before lockdown happened. We all went home for the day to try it, and the whole company was going to go remote, and we didn't know we weren't going to make it back in again. And so our customer and our customer base looked to get their problem solved much more online all of a sudden, because the call centers couldn't stand up to answer the calls because they weren't there. People couldn't get there to answer the phones for a while. So that took a little bit of a transition to get across. But people generally don't want to talk to people. Given a choice, in a customer service and situation, if I don't have to talk to a person and I can do it all digitally, well, all the better. So, and that's not just throwaway thought, it's our actual experience, it's what we've seen. And every channel you offer somebody to come in on, they will use it. So the more channels you offer, the more they'll use them. So it's getting the mix right, and it's staying focused on the ones that win and not being afraid to switch off the ones that don't, which is often quite a daunting prospect. And it is a challenge culturally for people to transition from maybe talking to people on the phone to suddenly typing. But the beauty of the digital conversation allows you to have that pre-canned answer, that quality answer that you want to be communicated by everybody. and the use of AI, the use of bots that, you know, do some of that front loading for you is great. You know, and it is like the next generation IVR, where you're quite happy, you know, ask this, ask that, and bring your customer through a nice flow that isn't jarring on them, that isn't going, have to think in their own time, at their own pace, and then you're having a much more educated conversation with them when you do, if you do have to pick up the phone. So yeah, it's been amazing how fast it's gone and how fast we've all adjusted to it.
Thank you, Gavin. Really interesting insights. I particularly like the point about being brave and shutting channels down if they're not well used. That's an excellent point. Can we come to Will? Will, you're in financial services. What's your view of the shift in consumer preferences? Have they moved towards digital?
Yeah, they have. I think the shift was well and truly underway in the retail banking space long before the pandemic, with the rise of the fintechs like your Monzos and your Revoluts. I think what the pandemic has done is it's forced previously reticent companies in the B2B banking space to say that we need to catch up with retail banking, and that's something at Close Brothers that we've certainly had to do very quickly. The second point, and I think it's an extension of what Gavin was saying, is I think interestingly you may very well be seeing the death of omni-channel as this kind of channel strategy nirvana that it has been over the last 5 to 10 years. It's one of those kind of awfully vague, nebulous buzzwords, omni-channel. But if you think of it in the past as people saying, you know, you want to be able to give the customer the choice of how they communicate with you across the customer journey, and it all needs to connect together. I think you're seeing increasingly now companies being a bit more bold and saying we're very happy to have particular points of the customer journey being a digital-only choice for the customer, or you know, and looking to fully digitize those sorts of interactions. That's kind of started with your digital first platforms like your Deliveroos and your Ubers. You know, you'll notice a lot of the time it's very, very hard to actually get on a phone call with someone like an Uber, and that's very deliberate because they've taken a strategy that says, well, no, we actually don't want to provide endless channel choice across all elements of the customer journey. There are certain elements which we think it's cheaper, faster, easier to have a digital-only strategy, then we're happy with that. And I think increasingly you're going to hear omni-channel potentially fall out of the conversation in favour of, well, we want to have a digital first positioning in the low value elements of the customer journey whilst maintaining, you know, that face-to-face or more personalised engagement at more particular points, which is an interesting development.
Thank you very much, Will. So you've heard it here first. Omni-channel is dead, at least in B2B financial services. Let's go from financial services to water. Kit, what's your view, please?
So we've seen an exponential growth in our digital take-up, that shift over the period of the pandemic. I would absolutely agree with what Will was saying about we were already on that journey. I was looking yesterday actually at some data over the last 3 years by quarter of our key customer journeys and their channel percentage, i.e. percentage of customers that say move house across the telephone, digital, and social media, etc. And the shift was gradual but consistent each quarter, and then it just skyrockets in the last 6 months. So we've seen in our key customer journeys about a 30% up increase in digital take-up, which is way beyond our expectations. We just completed a big transformation program, so this year we were planning to leverage and market that digital offering, but and we still are actually, but the pandemic has really, if you want to take a positive from a global pandemic, and there aren't many, the pandemic has really helped us do that. And I think to the point made earlier about customers not being able to get through on traditional channels, so then utilizing digital, we've benefited from actually not the fact that customers can't get through to us, because they can. We pivoted our business a bit like Gavin talked about in your business. We moved the whole of our business to working from home over 3 days, and maintained really strong levels of customer service on the telephone. But what we benefited from was the assumption that customers wouldn't be able to get through. So because they couldn't get through to, their airline or and I won't name organisations, they couldn't get through to certain organisations. They assumed they wouldn't be able to get through, I think, on the telephone to Welsh Water. So our telephone calls naturally dropped and our digital take-up went there. And maybe people also became more trusting of that channel and more familiar with that channel. I've always said I think that's helped by the fact that we are or have been locked down. So people are utilising digital to maintain human contact far more. So if they're doing that, actually, I've become much more au fait with how to use my mobile phone. Actually, I'm probably much more likely now to utilise my mobile phone to move house for Welsh Water rather than pick up the phone as I traditionally did. So yes, very, very much a similar journey to the guys described before me.
Thanks, Kit. Good to hear. So digital has obviously become more important, and if people want to talk, they can always get through to you in Wales Water. That's good to hear. All of the panelists have talked about change and transformation, which is a great segue into our second question. So the second question is planning for transformation. What are the common challenges that we've experienced when implementing a conversational experience? The common challenges when implementing a conversational experience. We start with Gavin this time, please. Gavin.
Sure. I think the biggest one I've seen, and I've done a couple of them at this point in significantly large organizations with dealing with people, is there is the concept that, we're just going to move a channel switch and we're going to bring in chat and it's going to solve X amount of problems for us immediately. It is, in experience, do it slowly, do it bit by bit, take one journey, get it right on that one journey, get the results you want, get your NPS right, and then look to expand it into the other journeys that you're doing. And equally from the agents that are doing it, well, the expectation is your agent's going to be handling maybe 3 or 4 chats simultaneously, and if they've come from a call center background where they've been on the phone, they're maybe they're only dealing with one. Maybe they've got one on hold, but generally they're dealing with one. So your cost to serve, comes down with that. And people can be a bit nervous going, if we move all this stuff to chat, are we going to lose people? Are people going to go? Whereas actually you're going, no, we can just serve more and do better with what we have in the right channel mix. So I suppose really it's people sometimes try and do too much. And there is that fear of any type of change that people have where they're going, is this the right thing to do? I mean, what we have kind of works. And it's kind of, yeah, it is. It is because your cost of ownership is always going to come down the more you can use AI and the more you can utilize an individual interacting with 3 or 4 people rather than just one. But it's to keep an eye on it, keep focused on it, and just, bring people on the journey with you. There's always fear for change.
Absolutely. Yeah, often a lot of fear. And very interesting to hear that some of your guys are multitasking. I can certainly see how that drives efficiency. Will, what about in your world? Obviously a very different sector. What are you seeing around implementation of conversational experiences?
Yeah, I think there's even a challenge before you get to the implementation side, and it's how do you actually sell it across the organisation. Gavin put it very well when he said, people generally don't actually want to speak to someone on the phone if they can avoid it. And yet there's this instinctive mindset amongst many kind of executives that says, we need to offer a voice first strategy because that's part of our traditional proposition, or that provides a certain level of personalised service which customers want. And when you take a step back and think as a customer yourself, generally a lot of the time you just want to get something done and get it done quickly. So how do you actually convince people that you can deliver a comparable or a better experience via messaging as you would over the phone is the first thing. And then leading on from that, how do you actually sell the potential ROI benefits of that? So it's relatively easy to talk about it as a cost efficiency play, but it's much harder to sell the ROI from the experience improvement that you may be able to deliver from messaging. What's the ROI if you manage to improve your NPS by 5 points? It's a very, very difficult conversation, which I don't think many companies have really nailed. And then when you do get into the execution side of things, the one that comes to mind for me is, well, how are you actually embedding your brand and your purpose into a messaging experience? So it's very, very easy to think of this as just a technology-led transformation, but at the same time, you need to be thinking, well, how does, say, a chatbot communicate in a way which is consistent with the values and the purpose of your organisation? The way that, say, a chatbot or even an agent on messaging will communicate will be very different for a Close Brothers, for example, as it would be for a Monzo, and then very, very different for a Welsh Water again. So you can't just think of this as a technology change. You have to think about this as a broader experience-led change, and that requires a lot of deep thinking around the type of communication that you want to deliver and the way in which you do it. And that's something which I think a lot of companies forget to do.
Thanks, Will. Really good insight. So I was particularly interested in the stakeholder buy-in point, which in my industry and professional services is absolutely key as well. Kit, what are you seeing on the implementation journey?
Very similar to the other guys. I think absolutely agree with Gavin's point about not trying to boil the ocean in one attempt. It's for us, it's all about incremental delivery. Agile delivery for digital absolutely lends itself perfectly to that. You deliver a small piece of the product that provides benefit to our customers and to the business. You test, you learn, you go again. If you try and create the whole thing in one go, it's never going to work. You're not going to get it right. You're not going to learn from your first iterations, etc. So that's, as an example, that's the approach we're taking to our chatbot, who's called Lily, by the way, who's as in the Welsh spelling of Lily rather than the English. But that's the exact approach we take. Just started her off on certain pages, certain journeys, and built from there. The challenge, I think, as well on that conversational piece about, are we creating something that we want to, are we attempting to dupe our customers into thinking they're talking to a real person, or are we absolutely upfront about the fact that we are creating an AI experience, and that's the latter is definitely the route we've gone. It's, we're very clear that you're speaking to a bot, and we hope our bot is very helpful. But if you don't want to and would prefer to speak to one of our colleagues, you can absolutely do so as well. So I think that's key in terms of the buy-in piece that kind of Will touched on. That's definitely something to consider, and I think for us, one of our key messages to the business is, yes, we are looking to provide digital solutions that will innovate, provide efficiency, and reduce our cost to serve. But ultimately, there will always be a requirement for really highly skilled customer service colleagues to have quality conversations, particularly in relation to difficult, vulnerability related, specialist conversations that require that, that difficult skill, customer service skill. So if we can take away, and that's, absolutely what we're focused on at the moment, if we can take away that, the non-value add conversations to give people more time to focus on where they can really add value, then that's brilliant for us. And obviously we will make savings over time, but if we can do that in a, through natural attrition, it should reassure the business that, digital isn't here to take over. Digital is here to supplement and look at those journeys that, aren't necessarily adding a massive amount of value for our colleagues.
Really interesting. Thanks, Kit. So using digital for the, I guess, basic stuff and the human touch for the more sophisticated, more difficult challenges. Why don't we come to Samantha? Samantha, you're a bit of an expert in this field. What are you seeing?
Well, I've been frantically scribbling away based on your notes, because everything you're saying, I want to touch on it. I want to say, yes, we agree. We've seen that too, and give you some examples. I think when we look at the approach to this, it truly is transformational. I think you've all touched on this. It's not as simple. You don't want to boil the ocean, but you've got to start somewhere. And those are the three key things I think we tend to see. Again, who's the buy-in in the company? Who's your main stakeholder? When we have the right buy-in, when we have the stakeholders, the movement, the trajectory we've seen has been incredible. So again, this is an example around Corona and the virus and the pandemic. But we had a brand who had an 18-month plan to roll out a specific part of messaging, and they moved that into 3 weeks. And that's for a high street leading bank. You know, that's not something where you can normally affect change very quickly. And so having stakeholder buy-in as high in the business as you can as possible does help to propel that. I think I want to really focus though back on something, Kit, that you were saying there around Lily. So first of all, I love that you have named your bot. We have a whole set of standards around what makes a great conversational experience, and designing your bot has got to be as important as designing your website.
Yeah, sorry, and apologies for interrupting. We designed it, but we also got everyone to vote. So the first thing we did was got everyone in the customer service teams to come up with their suggestions to name the chatbot. And then we shortlisted it and to the appropriate suggestions that we had, and then we got everyone to vote on it. So hopefully created a bit of engagement and buy-in and brand awareness when doing it. Apologies for interrupting you, Samantha.
I think it's great to interrupt me. I get carried away because I enjoy talking about this so much. So all of you, feel free to interrupt me at any time. But it's a great story. That's perfect. It's customer engagement. It's employee engagement. And actually, I think there's a fear around bringing in automation. There's a fear around what that transformation means. And I don't know if Gavin or Will, if it was you who mentioned that there's people in the business who think, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen if we do bring in automation? What happens to my agent jobs? Well, in effect, we've just spoken about creating a good customer experience. The people who know your customers best are your agents. They're talking to them day in and day out. They know what good conversation looks like. And so actually we found that when it comes to building your bots and optimizing your bots and refining your bots, those are actually the best people to do it. And if you give them the right tools, if you give them a simple no-code kind of bot, we've got a platform that does that, but it's giving people who have those skills the right tools to build their customer experience, then actually we're creating new jobs. It's not a case of replacing them. It's building a new set of skills, and it's a desired skill to be a bot trainer. That's not something that existed a couple of years ago, but that is a job that's available now. That's a job that we're seeing coming up in call centers. And I think that talks back to the point here we have around transformation. Messaging isn't the same as chat. It's not the same as the phone. And if we try and follow the same processes and thinking that you've had for those channels, it's not going to work. You can't fit messaging into your phone size square hole, or, it doesn't quite work that way. You've got to be prepared to rethink. And that's again where we see the challenge for businesses is not retraining your agents, but really teaching them to think differently. And it's not just your agents, it's the people in your process, it's your quality assessors, it's right down to how your back-end systems work. That's where the true transformation is. And that's why you need that buy-in and that stakeholder support, because all through your business, and I'm sure you'll agree, the KPIs change. It's no longer about average handle time. It's really about how many of our customers can we serve? What is their level of effort? How long does it take us to resolve that query? Do they have to speak to us 10 times or just the once? Actually, does it matter? Because they wanted to speak to us on their time. That's where I think the transformation is much bigger than just where are we starting. It's really how are we changing what good looks like for our customers.
Because every customer is different. And what good looks like for me could be different to you. And you're so right. That ability to pause, come back, do things in your own time. I'm busy now, I can't deal with that, but it's there when I'm going to come back to it. And bringing people on the journey of this isn't something you've done before. It's wide open. It's like, I remember having a conversation with one of the IVR people and saying, think of all the things you couldn't do that you wanted to do, but you couldn't because you were stuck in an IVR. Yeah. Okay, good. That's a good starting point. Let's go from there. And Kit, as you said, it so lends itself to agile. It so lends itself to little chunk. And Kit, I think you said it, we're the same. We're very much UX driven, very much experience. So everything we do, we lab the life out of before we even let loose near a customer, and when I say lab the life out with customers, and then take it up a level and give it to a wider customer set. But this truly is one of the great things about the conversation pieces, because you can literally nearly do whatever you want and react to changing needs and changing demands. It's not set in stone.
Great points, Gavin. Thank you very much. And thanks, Samantha, for your comments as well about getting buy-in from all stakeholders, customers, employees, etc. Very, very important. And if you buy in all the way, you can now become a professional bot trainer. So something I'm going to be looking up later on. Thanks. So let's move on to our third question. We've talked about how digital is important, how transformation is being undertaken, but what about marketing and promotion once you've actually made the change? So the questions to the panel, please, are how are you promoting the adoption of messaging channels? And what promotion options have led to the most substantial usage increase? So the tactics of promotion and what works best. Will, why don't we start with you this time, please?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the couple of things I'd say is number one, you've got to be really clear with your customers around what the purpose of your chatbot is. If you're speaking to Pizza Hut's chatbot, you're probably not going to find the menu of life, but you probably will be able to put in your address to be able to order a pizza. And I think for example, I was just doing this the other day, just ordering a pizza, and I was actually going through their chatbot, and they're very, very clear in the outset of that conversation. This is what I can help you with, and I think that's really, really important. It goes to Kit's point as well around kind of really clearly identifying, well, kind of, we are being very open that this is a chatbot. It is limited in what it can do, and as long as you're really explicit about that, I think that's important from a marketing perspective. Then I think as well, when you're thinking about the marketing piece, it's, well, what kind of model for your messaging platforms do you want to embed? Do you want to, for example, make your data open to a third party that can deliver your product via a chatbot to its algorithms, which is the Alexa style model? Do you want to integrate your brand or your products into a partner ecosystem, or do you want to go it alone and create your own chatbot? Each of these has their own pluses and minuses, but there's some strategic considerations to think about in terms of your chatbot strategy before you decide to start building. I think they're probably the two big ones for me when I think about the promotional piece.
Thank you for that, Will. Interestingly, when you mentioned the name of the Amazon AI, I had lights flashing on the device next to me, so fortunately avoided an embarrassing moment there. Will, thanks for those comments. Kit, why don't we come to you? What can you share on the marketing and promotion side, please?
So in terms of marketing promotion, I would suggest we're quite early into our journey. So we had planned to do a big marketing campaign and really starting to push our digital channels this year, and we wanted to make sure the digital experience was as good as was at a level that we were proud of, and were confident that marketing campaign would be met with a positive experience if people took it up. So that's why we held off doing it for a little while. So we planned to do it this year. That got delayed because actually, just as we were about to press go on the campaign, the lockdown happened. So in some ways, as we talked about earlier, we had a natural shift anyway. So it wasn't an issue in terms of pausing campaign. We've just restarted it. We launched in August an internal campaign, so an incentive for colleagues around the promotion of digital. So, as an example, if someone calls our contact center, they're looking to set up a direct debit, move house, do any of the types of things you would expect someone to be able to do online. If the colleague that takes the call I won't use the word sells, but it positively speaks about the digital experience the customer could use in the future, recognises the opportunity to sign up for a digital account, get rid of paper bills, all of those exciting things, then they get entered into a prize draw to win some quite exciting prizes. So we started it internally, and literally today we've pressed go on an external incentive for our customers. So customers signing up for our digital account, they are going to a draw to win. It's not a massive prize. It's £100 worth of Amazon vouchers, but it's for Welsh Water, a not-for-profit organisation. That's quite substantial, and it'll be really interesting to see what that does for our take-up. We've done some light encouragement prior to that, but not incentivising it alongside the marketing. Just some paid for advertising, general social media content, etc. And that has driven a bit of take-up. It'll be interesting to see how incentivising it impacts it. Now that that's gone live, so yeah, one that I can probably talk more about in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you very much for that. Interesting to hear about the use of incentives and the second mention of Amazon in the last couple of minutes. which is I'm sure a good thing for them. Why don't we come to you, Samantha? Any comments about Amazon, or shall we focus on your tactic?
Well, we could get carried away talking about that, and I too might have mine light up if I give the name. So what I will turn to though is, Kit, I love that you're bringing on board your people. I think that is so critical. We talk about external marketing, and I will come back to that, but I think there's a lot to be said for internal promotion. And when your people believe in something and they're bought into it, then that also rings true when they speak to their people, when they're talking to your customers on the phone. Promotion can be as simple as, hey, do you know next time there's another way to do this? Just so you know, here's how we can do this. And if your people are on board, it really, really shows through. So I'm a huge, huge advocate of that. I think I have a couple of examples for you, but promotion is sometimes as simple as just being on the channels where your customer is, right? So where we had T-Mobile in the States is a really good example of true buy-in and advertising, but even just having the button in their app, 70% of their customers chose to use messaging and then didn't go back. They stayed on messaging, and that's powerful too. That means it's a great CX. That means you're where your customers want to be, but you don't have to remarket that. They've already had a good experience, and the experience has spoken for itself. So that's, I think, again, prevalent. You can do that button on your website, in your IVR, the option about messaging. Promotional messages, two-way messaging is huge right now with our brands. If you think about it, we spend millions and millions on promotional messages. Most of my SMSs tend to be something from a brand telling me about a promotion or something coming up. But if I want to get back in touch with them, the only way I can really do that is to give them a call. So we're driving calls. And one of our brands said to us recently that they know where 60% of all their contacts are coming from. They know, they can pinpoint to the intent why that consumer is going to call and when that's going to be. And if they could just get ahead of that, if they could just capture the customer before that breaking point, they'd be stopping those contacts coming into the system. So proactive messaging is as simple as sending whatever message you would normally send, or getting in front of that intent and then offering the option to respond in that channel. So we've seen a lot of success with that in SMS, but more in WhatsApp, and being able to send something in a channel that people recognize. So I really think promotion and in marketing is about having that experience, being where your customers are. And then you can take it a step further. We have some TV ads. A lot of the banks who were with us today, we were quite open with their customers. And as you say, I think, Kit, you were saying about setting the expectations, or maybe Will, I think. If your customers understand that you're going to be available in another channel, and this is the best way to do it, they're more likely to buy in. So just being present and being honest, I think, has been very, very powerful in our experience.
Thank you. Good to hear. So availability in the channels that customers want to use is key. Last but not least, Gavin, what are you seeing in the energy business?
So from the conversation promotion side, British Gas obviously an awful lot more mature in the chat space than Board Gas is, but even for us, it was a simple, like, you've gone through the pain of going to a website, and then you picked a number, then you ring the call center, and the first thing they say is, well, if you go to our website, you'll be able to resolve, and you're like, ah. So we got ahead of that, changed our IVR messaging slightly as well to say, look, if you want to do this on chat, you can do it on the site, and then into the rest of the messaging. But then just actually it pops, and we only have it, we don't have it everywhere. We have it on where we believe it's really going to bring value, and it's more on the support side, but we've now started to weave it into the selling side as well, to offer support to people should they have questions, or if they pause, so if they're somewhere for a second, we see a pause, then we might pop a chat to them and say, you suck, or could we help, or whatever. And it's growing kind of organically rather than a big force push. And I don't believe we will do a come and chat to us on our chat channel anytime in the next 6 months, but we'll see. It is a really successful channel. So
thank you. Good to hear it's going well. And the difficult scenario you articulated of calling someone up only to be told to go to the website which referred you to the call number is something I've experienced myself. We've been talking about what works and what doesn't work, and I think that's a great segue to our next question on optimization. But before I articulate the question, just a reminder to our audience, if you have any other questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and in about 10 minutes time, we will turn to those questions. So question number 4, optimization. What is most important to consider when optimizing a conversational experience? I know we've touched on a bit of this so far, so just to read the question again, what's most important to consider when optimizing a conversational experience? Kit, could we start with you this time, please?
Sure. So I think it's quite simple. Your customer would be my answer. I know that sounds a bit simplistic, but like anything that you develop and you deliver, you've got to do it with your customer embedded in that development process. I've seen so many failed AI, digital, online, or even just general customer service products, services that fail because they didn't involve the customer in that design. So, you know, build it, test it on a group of customers, iterate it, improve it, go again. So, you know, that does sound a bit simplistic, but it's amazing how many people don't do that as part of their design. And then, you know, in terms of improving it once you've got it live, it's all about, you know, looking at what your customers are saying, understanding the, you know, if I take our chatbot as an example, you know, looking at all of those failed conversations, what are the high hitting elements that customers aren't able to answer on our with our chatbot, take out the big hitters, then move down and down until you're really trying to cover all of the potential experiences they could have, even if you get down to the silly questions, which you might want to, you know, provide a funny, silly answer to. So, and then I think the other element is to make sure that you structure your digital services for continuous improvement rather than just program delivery. So by that I mean, you know, we've got a digital transformation program, but it is 100% aligned and has a number of the same resources as the digital team who do the BAU stuff, who look after the website and the services on that. And once the product has been delivered by the digital transformation team, it will move across to the digital team. It will then manage it and incrementally improve it. If you just treat things as a project, one done, right, that's finished, on to the next thing, forget about it, then you're never going to get that. You're never going to get that enhancement, that refinement, that continuous improvement. So it's about investing in that, making sure you set aside the right level of funding and resource to manage that through. I think one of the other pitfalls is to, you know, heavily invest in your digital transformation, and then once it's done, right, well, we don't need any more money for that because we've done that. That's, you know, that approach is never going to work. So in summary, setting yourselves up for that continuous improvement approach is really key.
Absolutely, yeah, that's so powerful and so right that you know, it isn't a one and done. And when we talked earlier on, actually, we probably missed that. About what are the challenges to the transformation piece. A lot of people do think of it in that way, and that it's just, we're going to do this and we're done with it. Whereas, you know, if it's a product and it's a living, breathing product that we have to continuously do. So we've been fortunate enough in our place to know that and be aware of that, and we kind of plan for, we're going to do at least 4 iterations over the course of a year, maybe more, but 4 big ones where we're really going to sit back and reflect and see what we've done, and then lab it and then do it and then go again. But that's really, yeah, that's really good. Put the customer first into the conversation is an angle I hadn't thought of. I was dreading this question, I have to be honest, but it's been great.
Well, you've given a good answer on the back of what Kit said. So customer first and feedback loop. Samantha, I can see you nodding enthusiastically. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Plenty, but I will rein myself in and give a shorter answer. I, again, completely agree. I think what we're seeing is you've got to look at your automation slightly differently to the way you would look at your traditional contact center. And I love the idea of your customer focus, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to win in 3 ways. You're trying to win from a customer experience perspective. You're trying to win from an efficiency perspective. And generally from a business perspective, you're trying to win against your strategy. So whether that's being the first to market something, whether that's being the best in what you do, there's all these goals that you're constantly looking to achieve. And what we find is generally in the more traditional channels like voice, like chat, it became more about how quickly can we get the answer to you? How quickly can we service this and keep it efficient? And so going back to that customer experience is, I think, a really fundamental place to start and a good place to build from, because you can do that with both your humans and with your bots. We treat them the same in the platform because we want you to be able to manage your bots in the same way. And I think your point, Kit and Gavin, both of you spoke about the fact that you can't just have a bot and let it go. A bot really is something you might treat your retrain your agent. We said there was a bot trainer earlier. Well, actually, there's bot managers. You can't just let a bot loose. And I think the important piece here is also what you are looking at as a success criteria. So going back to those KPIs being different, it's not necessarily about our usual stock standard contact center calls per hour. It actually goes back to, is containment the right measure? Because we look at that and we say, oh, your bot can only contain 80% or 40% or 12% of those conversations. And actually, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes the best thing for that customer is to be transferred to a human. Sometimes you actually build that in so that there is an escalation path. So your bot does the job it's meant to do up until the point where it cannot, or where it doesn't suit the customer, and then you use your agent's time more valuably. And I think, again, that's probably the piece that I would take from this, is that ability to optimize, to actually understand what your customers really want. So we call it the intent. What are they actually reaching out to you for? How are you making that a good experience when they do that? How are we keeping a business efficient? But are we actually looking at this from those right KPIs? And certainly our learnings over the last couple of years have been how different those need to be, and how as a business we can support you in looking at those, because it's very challenging to go back and to say, hey, the way we measured things before needs to be different going forward, and this is why.
Thank you. Good point, Samantha. So I can add to my job applications list bot manager, but to your points on KPI and metrics, we'll come to that in a second. But before we do, Will, you're obviously in financial services. What are you seeing in the optimization sphere?
Yeah, I'd throw out, in addition to agreeing with what I've heard, I'd throw out maybe a couple of risks in the optimization space. And the first is what I would call half-assed agile. We've talked about agile delivery being a good approach for this space, but many organisations, particularly traditional organisations, will say they're doing agile, but they're really not. They'll say they're doing sprints. They'll put up the Scrum board, but really it'll be a waterfall development process, and they won't be pulling together a cross-functional team. They'll be delivering out of the same product and functional silos that they've always had, and that can actually be quite counterproductive. So I think that the first thing I'll say is if you're going to choose an agile delivery approach, you've got to actually invest in it. You've got to make sure your people are upskilled in that sort of way of working to be able to adopt it properly. And then you've got to think about your fundamental org structure, or at least your how you organise in your team. So you are bringing together a cross-functional team that goes from the marketing side, the dev side, the operational side, to make it actually work effectively. And that leads into the second challenge, which I think is a lot of businesses don't think about the capabilities that they need to be able to deliver a chatbot successfully. So I think a lot of people know that you need to have, devs and data scientists to be able to do it. But, there are a lot of creative kind of capabilities that you can actually enrich your messaging capabilities with. A lot of fintechs, including one of my favourites, Lemonade, have several behavioural scientists to be able to incorporate behavioural science into their messaging to be able to nudge customers in particular directions. I was reading the other day that Microsoft have hired a couple of poets to be able to get the tone of voice just right for their particular chatbot. There is in some particularly sensitive industries, in-house ethicists that are thinking about the privacy and data ramifications of sharing data via messaging platforms. I'm not necessarily suggesting that people need to go out and hire poets and behavioural scientists straight away, but what I'm suggesting is that you do need to be thinking a bit more holistically around the design of your messaging solution, as opposed to just saying this is just a tech challenge.
I think the tech challenge is the least part. Sorry, Samantha, but I think the tech has got to be given. This stuff exists. We need to apply it. It's actually everybody else other than us. We're just the doers to enable what people want to get done. I think that, the bit that we do is the easiest part. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree, Gavin. And I think we have a collective name for what you were discussing there, Will, and it's your conversational design. We touched on it earlier. As much as you might design your website or your app, you build that conversation. And that's why I think we're going to see more and more of these new job titles. I've mentioned just a couple there, but you've got a few. And I know even we hired in life business and script writers. So people who would typically have written scripts for Hollywood or for TV. And how can you create a story? How can you tell a compelling story that's a great customer experience? Well, again, some people are very skilled in that. And today, building a bot isn't just product; it is the whole package. And certainly, where we've seen very successful results with our customers is where they have an agile team that works post delivering that bot. So again, Will, to your point, there's some really successful bots out there, but it takes 2 or 3 or 4 people to review that, to look over those experiences, to look over where the process is letting them down or where it's people, and really just refine and work on that. And we have a product called Intent Analyzer in our suite. I have to mention it because it's really geeky. It's great. It's brilliant. It's got loads and loads of data, and it's all the conversations that you have in our platform. And we're able to use AI and to use NLU and all sorts of technology behind that to really understand what each of your customers are saying. What is their intent? And then from that, we can also look at their sentiment. How happy or unhappy was that customer during the conversation? And in fact, at what point in the conversation did that change? Was there a certain point? And can we coach the bot on that? Or can we coach the human on that? And actually, when you can look at it holistically like that, you can also look to see what are the main things people are contacting us about that we can automate easily. And I think that's another thing we probably don't have time to chat about, but what are the right intents to automate? What are the right intents to part automate? And what are the right intents? If you've got vulnerable customers, for example, you might want to get that through to a human straight away. So how do we do that? And I think it's really interesting when you start to look at the whole big piece of what you're doing in those smaller intents, because it ultimately comes down to what your customer is contacting you for.
Really sophisticated stuff. Good to hear. Thank you, Samantha. I mean, if I summarize my learnings from that discussion, agility is key, but make sure you think holistically and have the infrastructure in place. And thinking holistically, we only have 2 minutes left of the scheduled time for this and one final scheduled question. So perhaps I can ask each of our 4 panelists for one pithy comment in response to the following question around metrics and measurements. How are you measuring customer experience from a financial perspective? So financial metrics that you use to measure the customer experience. I can see Gavin is not on mute, in which case I'll come to you first, Gavin, please.
Right. Well, I think of the answer. We have a head of conversations job. You can add that onto your list, right? So in British Gas, we have a head of conversations. It's an actual full-blown senior role. Okay, so for us, like with anything, it's always a challenge in this one. How do you put a price on NPS? How do you put a price on a return investment to match or even raise a benefits case to get the money in the first place? So I do it personally, I think it needs to follow the following, and it's easy to sell. Retention and churn. So happy customers don't leave. Happy customers stay with you. So if you can keep them happy, and you will only do that by giving them an enriching experience. If they've got a crap experience, then the next person that comes along that offers them the same price and a better experience, they're gone. Loyalty is fleeting. So to lock in loyalty, you need to make sure that everything they want to do is as frictionless as you can make it for them. That's it. Reduce your churn.
Great. Keep the friction down. Thank you. Will, what would you like to say in conclusion?
I agree with that. I think if Gavin's point is almost the kind of the tricky way of trying to measure ROI for experience, the easier way is looking at the cost efficiency side of things. So it's relatively easy to be able to show a cost efficiency from a channel shift from assisted to unassisted channels. I think when you're building a business case, that's probably the starting point. And then if you can get to that next level of them being able to develop a rounded business case, which includes the ROI on experience improvement as well, then you've got a very, very sophisticated case to sell. So they're probably the 2 lenses that I'd be looking at.
Yeah, great points and a challenge for us all. Kit, a final word for you, please.
Yeah, so agree with what the guy said. I think we've got a really clear view on our business case for digital investment, what that will mean in terms of customer shifting and reduction in other channels, and what that will mean to our cost to serve over time. Unlike Gavin, we don't have the issue of customers choosing to hop across to somewhere else for the cheapest price because you use the water provider you have in your where you live. However, that, you know, my and our motto is we should treat our customers as if they could. That's, you know, otherwise you get into a lazy mentality where you're not striving to deliver excellent customer service. So we can't let that be an excuse to provide fantastic service and try and measure the improvements that we're delivering there.
Great. So no excuses. Final word, please, Samantha. What are your thoughts on measurement?
I would agree in summary with what everything has been shared on here so far. You know, I think you're right. It's difficult to quantify your CSAT or your NPS results, but it's very compelling when you look at channel shift, when you look at the difference between efficiency. So we've seen 2 times, generally applicable 2 times efficiency from the phone into messaging. Even from chat to messaging, we see a 1.5 times uplift generally in efficiency. So those numbers stack up for themselves. The other side, though, that I think is really critical is also your cost to serve within the business. So how much your agents are costing you, what your agent turnover is, and what that looks like. And what we've found is, and this is genuinely got some great videos on it, it's been a great experience for our agents to go from the very stressful world of being on the phone and being shouted at and, you know, time kept, to being in a space where they can message and they can actually make a great experience. They can be in charge of that experience, and it's not as stressful for the agents, and that's showing up for our brands in their retention results, in their churn, and that's your retraining. And so suddenly your ROI isn't just about your cost to serve in those channels, it's also about your cost to retain. And we're seeing a significant uplift there for our brands in their savings.
Really interesting. Cost to retain is not something that I've seen used very regularly, but perhaps it's the future, alongside the kind of intent analysis that you described, Samantha. I'm sorry, I'm conscious of time. We've passed the 3 o'clock mark, so perhaps we should conclude there. I'm sure if anyone on the call has questions, please do email them in to Inspired, and we can ask the panelists to respond to you directly. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much to each of our panelists, to Gavin, to Kit, to Samantha, and to Will. Thank you to Inspired Business Media for putting this event together, and especially thank you to Live Person for commissioning the event. So thank you all. Been a very interesting experience personally, and look forward to speaking to you again. Have a good afternoon.